This past weekend saw the annual running of the Grand Prix of Toronto, a race that's been held every year since 1986, except for the 2 years that it was cancelled thanks to COVID. It's one of the longest tenured street races in not just IndyCar history, but global racing history altogether. However, before the streets of Toronto played host to a race, the road course of choice in Ontario was Mosport, or as it's called today, Canadian Tire Motorsports Park. Canadian Tire, built 40 miles east of Toronto, is the oldest still operating purpose-built motorsports facility in all of Canada, having opened all the way back in 1961. Of the 62 years that the track has been open, it's hosted just 4 IndyCar races, but I think it could host a 5th. In this video, I'd like to take a look at that question, take it into consideration, and put my bun in the simulator to figure out whether Canadian Tire Motorsports Park should be on the IndyCar schedule. So before we get down to answering the question, let's go over this track's history. Built at a cost of just $500,000, about $500 million in today's money, Canadian Tire Motorsports Park began hosting races in June of 1961. Since then, it's hosted the Formula 1 Canadian Grand Prix, the MotoGP Canadian Grand Prix, Can-Am, World Superbikes, Trans Am, the GT World Challenge, USAC IndyCars, and the NASCAR Truck Series, along with currently hosting the NASCAR Pinty Series and IMSA. So it's fair to say the track has a rich history in motorsports. So it's a bit surprising that they've only ever run 4 IndyCar races there. So what if we decide to go back? Well, chances are the organizers of the street race in Toronto wouldn't be very happy, but I think the Canadian IndyCar fans deserve well more than just one race in their country. If we can't go to places like Vancouver, Edmonton, or even Winnipeg, then Canadian Tire will have to do. Me personally, I'd much rather have a race on a classic road course than a street course, and I think many drivers would agree with me on that point. Now, I'm not saying we should get rid of Toronto, obviously. The track may not produce the best racing in the world, but it's still a great event, especially for the city of Toronto and Canadian IndyCar fans, period. What I am saying is that Canadian Tire would fit well as another home for IndyCar north of the border. Before making this video, I want to know how this combination would work. Now, unfortunately for me, I don't have a passport, nor do I own a fully functional Dallara IR18 IndyCar, but thankfully I have iRacing at my disposal to give this combination a whirl. The footage you see on screen now is of me trying this combination. Originally, you were going to see my first time trying this combo out, but about an hour after I recorded that footage last Sunday, my computer's motherboard got fried. So thankfully for my ego, that footage will never see the light of day again. Bad video quality with equally shocking driving standards notwithstanding, this was a pretty fun combination. It's definitely a challenging one for sure. Getting a driver's car and putting it on a driver's track doesn't make it a cakewalk to go fast, but it's still fun. Everything from just sending it through turn 4 to sliding it out of the final corner just makes it feel like you're on the edge at all times. If you just make a small little mistake, especially in this out-of-date version of the track with no asphalt runoff area to be seen, you're in big trouble. But that razor's edge nature is what makes great races great. It tests the driver's skill, and it does it in a far better way than a newer street circuit could. I'm sorry, but if we were to make another new street circuit in Canada like the ones we have in Nashville and Detroit currently, it'd be doing the Canadian IndyCar fans a bit of a disservice. This isn't something against all street circuits. I absolutely love street circuits and the racing they put on, but tracks like Detroit and Nashville, whose layouts seem intentionally malice, as if to encourage accidents with 5-car width sections bottlenecking into a single-file alleyway, that's where I have an issue. If we created another street circuit like that, it would be a disservice to IndyCar fans, period, let alone the ones in Canada. So instead of creating another street circuit whose lone purpose is to create chaos, let's go to Canadian Tire and put on a proper race on a proper racetrack, and enjoy these drivers pushing their cars and themselves to the absolute limit. It would be a spectacle for the viewers at home and the people at the track, and I'm sure the drivers wouldn't mind it either. But if we were going to do this, how exactly would we go about it? As I said before, Toronto isn't going anywhere. It's the 4th oldest race on the IndyCar calendar, just behind the Indy 500, the Long Beach Grand Prix, and Mid-Ohio. So for the Toronto fans out there, Canadian Tire won't interfere with Toronto. The Canadian Tire race wouldn't replace anything. It would just be a new event on the IndyCar calendar. If we have to shift some races around, so be it. I've maintained this opinion for a long time, but IndyCar ending its schedule in early September is just not a good idea. Hell, the off-season is so long I'm planning on covering an entire other IndyCar season throughout only 2/3 of it. So if we have to extend the schedule to fit a Canadian Tire race, that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. I'd say the best times for a race at Mosport would be around the Toronto race or late April. I will say that a race in fall would look pretty cool, with the changing colors of the trackside fauna creating a beautiful backdrop, but average high temperatures in September and October in that section of Canada range from the mid-60s to the high 50s. So if we were to do this in the fall, September would be the month to go, and probably very early September too. I'd try and schedule this race away from the Toronto race, so maybe September and April would be the time of the year to make a race happen at Mosport. But those types of decisions would have to be made by people way more powerful and qualified than myself. What I can say though is that an IndyCar race at Canadian Tire Motorsports Park would be a pretty good idea. I'm curious whether this kind of idea would be popular or not, so please give me your thoughts in the comments section. Thank you all for watching, and have a great afternoon.